It's become almost a truism when people think about Dante's Divine Comedy to feel that the Inferno makes sense. I even read one reviewer of the new James Bond movie saying that various scenes were like circles of hell. That the Purgatorio feels a bit distant, but it's about change and reform, and we're quite into that. But that the paradise clearly belongs to a former age and makes no sense now. It belongs to a period that held to what C.S. Lewis called a discarded image, the medieval worldview. But this is so tragic because Dante himself was completely clear that it's only in the paradise that true knowledge is found, true awareness flourishes, that human perceptions align with reality as it actually is. And so I wanted to offer a step by step riff rather than accurate account on Dante's own journey through the paradise and how his perception shifts, and so he becomes capable of seeing it all. He himself says we should follow him. He wrote so that our perception could change too. And I thought I'd do so partly by describing what I take Dante to be shown by Beatrice in each of the heavens, but also introducing a soul who might be my guide and help make these adjustments as well. So let's go straight away to the heaven of the moon, the first of the spheres that Dante and Beatrice enter as he begins his transhumanization, the extension of his humanity into its divinity. And one of the discussions they have there is about why the moon has shadows. And Dante offers a couple of explanations that sound quite scientific. He talks about the density of matter, for example. And yet Beatrice immediately corrects him and says, in a way, this is the first lesson to learn. You won't get anywhere in this paradisal vision of reality unless you prioritize quality over quantity, unless you think about the nature of things in themselves rather than the way that science is inclined to objectify them and measure things instead. So she says that the important thing about light and shade is that it all reflects in different ways the one light. And when you can see the one light, even in deep darkness, you can still stay in touch with paradise. And so this is the first lesson that Dante learns when he enters the sphere of the moon. That quality is the surer guide, the subjective, what we know directly within ourselves or within that which is shared with others. And the person who I feel might teach me this lesson is the philosopher Mary Midgley. She died not so long ago at a very great age. I was lucky enough to edit a couple of her books. And one of her common remarks was how the sciences have precisely lost touch with that which they try to study. So, for example, she would say that the biological sciences that study the living world have become life blind, that they don't see and can't account for, can't really engage with that which is most immediate to us as living creatures and to all the other living creatures and the environment itself around and about. You know, that the whole world resonates and radiates character, vitality, personality, and it's most peculiar that a science which studies this has become life blind. Well, maybe now she is seeing that that is affirmed in the heavens as well, in that quality is the truer guide to the nature of things. Not to discard the objective, to discard quantity. Of course, it can assist, but it needs to be the emissary and not the master. Dante gets this lesson and immediately finds himself in the second heaven, the heaven of Mercury. That's the way that these heavens open up to him. The minute he can see more is the minute that more reality opens up to him, and so he finds himself in a different aspect, a different perspective, a different take on things, which I think is why paradise actually matters this side of the grave as much as on the other side, because it opens up to us now. And the lesson which he learns in Mercury could be summarised like this, that we human beings long for glory and fame and wealth. And whilst that can be ruinously destructive, as was becoming clear in Dante's own time, because he lived during this period of the First Industrial Revolution, his father was a very successful cloth merchant, there is a true, good, valuable glory, wealth, and fame, which human beings rightly might aspire to and rightly might value when they see it in others. But this is the glory that comes from reflecting reality rather than abstracting from reality. So nowadays, wealth is usually measured in abstract figures, numbers, and the more that the number grows on the spreadsheet or on the ticker tape, the more wealth is felt to be possessed. But of course it's become more and more distant from reality, has become an abstraction in a silicon chip often in people's minds. And this reflects on the very grave dangers of usury, which Dante was also onto. Usury, which is when money is made out of money, abstraction is made out of abstraction. And I think Dante realised that the reason this is so risky is because, first of all, it removes us from reality, but removes us from reality under the delusion that we can make realities, that we can become creators and claim the glory for our own creations. And so in the heaven of Mercury, the figure he meets who must have toyed with this in his life, struggled with this in his life, is the Emperor Justinian, now remembered as one of the great emperors of the Byzantine period, though he was also a great thug and quite a monster at times. And Dante sees him wrestling his light over and against the light of Mercury. Mercury, the heaven, of course, reflects the divine light truly, and Justinian is working out how his glory might reflect the divine glory more accurately, and so he can disappear into the light of heaven. And a way of thinking about this is to recall the Ravenna mosaics, which is perhaps the most famous image of Justinian. And the Ravenna mosaics capture this ambivalence, which is so powerful now, about wealth, because in a way they are the display of a wealthy figure and glitter with his earthly glory. But they also inspire, they seem to reflect more. And so when you walk into the churches of Ravenna, you feel heart lifted, you feel the wonder of the place. And so Justinian, I think, never quite let go of how true glory is to connect with divine reality and transmit that, although he wrestled with this artificial abstract wealth that he accumulated. And it's clearly a hugely significant lesson for us to learn now, where usury really does make artificial worlds and ruins reality, ruins the natural world, as we would say now, in the process. The figure who I feel I might hope to meet here is St. Francis. I'm actually speaking on the eve of the feast of St. Francis. And I think he understood true glory, true fame, true wealth quite clearly. He discards the merchant wealth of his father and instead sings the praises of the sun, sings the praises of the moon, and gradually releases more and more of his material possessions, becoming poor in terms of this abstract notion of wealth, but becoming more and more glorious, more and more wealthy in the process. And His fame was sung around Europe in Dante's time and is still sung around the world today in our time, because he knew how to channel true glory, how to rejoice in true wealth, and so gain the fame which is actually the reflected light of the divine. Dante gets this, and so immediately finds himself in the third heaven, which is the heaven of Venus. And there's another development of these themes from quality through true glory to the nature of love, that which we desire. We desire these things. And so that's got to be addressed now. And what Beatrice shows him here is that there's a kind of extravagance to love which needs to be embraced, but not so as to project it onto others and so to desire others in our love lives, but rather to see their radiance and our radiance mingling together, suffused with the divine radiance. That's the nature of true love, true partnership, true connection. And he discovers this in the figures he meets, who are great lovers. And in fact, figures like Kunitsa or the biblical figure of Rahab would at first pass be thought to be promiscuous lovers. And Dante's, I think, slightly surprised to see them in heaven. But what they knew was that love was a delight to embrace in life and to feel in their own hearts, not to constantly give away to their objects of desire that they then longed for and craved for. That's why they were promiscuous, because they could receive and let go the delights of love as they moved through life. They weren't addicted to love, therefore. And the figure who I would hope to meet in the domain of Venus is the figure of Diotima, the priestess and prophetess who taught Socrates. Socrates tells us that he learnt the arts of loving from Diotima in Plato's Symposium. And the nub of what she managed to communicate to Socrates in what she calls the higher mysteries is that love is not something that you lack. Rather, it's a go-between that can carry you towards that which is good, beautiful, and true in itself, because what's good, beautiful, and true in itself awakens in you and those whom you love. It's a sort of triangulation of what we normally think of as a binary dynamic in our lives. You know, I love you and you love me if I and you are lucky. But that might be the way that love begins often, in falling in love. But there comes a moment where we have to learn to stand in love together. And that happens when this flame of love awakens inside ourselves and we realise that our desire was actually leading us much more broadly into life, to connect with that which is good. And Diotima describes this to Socrates. It's sometimes called the ladder of love, but actually the word ladder isn't in Plato's Symposium. It's much more about a growth and expansion, a reaching out of love that happens not in the desire to possess, but precisely because love is realised inside ourselves and so is reflected in our beloved, and that is what causes us to hug and hold each other, because we share in a much wider love. Dante gets this message in Venus as well, and immediately finds himself expanded, that little bit more attuned to reality in his perceptions, and so in the sphere of the sun, the fourth of the heavenly spheres. And here he meets very learned minds whose words in life spoke of the divine light. They didn't just love the divine light and so hoped for it. They knew it and so could speak of it. And they could speak of it with glorious words that fully reflected the divine light, as well as its qualities. So they'd absorbed the moon, Mercury, Venus, and so were in the sphere of the sun. But what is so interesting about the characters he meets are that they disagreed in life. as well, that are advocates of Averroism, a form of Islamic philosophy, as well as Thomism. The figure of Thomas Aquinas is in the sphere of the sun. And in fact, Thomas condemned as a heretic the Averroes Cigar, who Dante meets there as well. But what they now know is that their disagreements on earth were because of their mutual ignorance about the nature of divine truth, and that the words they spoke that seemed at loggerheads down below still reflected aspects of the divine life which shines now in heaven. And so their disagreement has become complement, that together, a bit like the harmony and discord perhaps in a piece of music, speak to a greater whole. And I think the lesson that Dante learns here, which is really important in the religious world, is that there is really only truth. And when the truth is not spoken, it's actually a display of ignorance of the truth, or distortion of the truth, or a yearning for the truth that comes out in perverse or disfiguring ways. And what Dante learns in the heaven of the sun, as he sits before these great luminaries that might have disagreed in life, is to discern the divine light that was in what they were all saying, that now joins up in a great harmony in heaven. So it's an exercise in listening and discerning in the heaven of the sun. And the figure who I think would guide in this domain, as he does, I think, even now, is the living philosopher and theologian David Bentley Hart. He is very learned across different truth traditions, and so capable of drawing out how they link and connect. And so his words and books seem to shine with the light of the sun. And more generally, it's when we're having discussions contesting what we regard as the truth, have the argument. Dante's not saying don't have the argument, but what he's saying is keep an eye out for that which unifies too, that which might be beneath a screen of seeming truth. Dante understands and enjoys this light, and immediately finds himself in the next heaven, the heaven of Mars. And I think that he does so because this attitude towards radiating with qualities, reflecting glory, loving that which is a flame inside yourself and others, reflecting and being able to detect and discern the one truth, requires an attitude of self-sacrifice. And Dante takes the heaven of Mars, the martial figure, to show him now a more accurate notion of sacrifice. It's not primarily about being sacrificed to appease a god. It's not that at all. Nor is it about sacrifice on the battlefield, which he knew about in his own life, although that does happen. It's really the insight of, I think it's T.S. Eliot, the poet, when he said that death is every moment, that living requires us constantly to be letting go of life in order to receive more of life. And similarly, this cultivates a virtue of humility, a bit like the sea into which everything flows. So this attitude of sacrificing the small self that we feel we want to hold on to opens us up into the ocean of the true self, or the divine. And Dante learns this by meeting an ancestor of his, a figure called Caccio Guida, who talks to him about how early Florence, unlike the Florence of Dante's own time, lived in the service, would be another way of putting it, lived in the service of a wider good and glory, and so shone and radiated in its youthful period that has spiraled down to Dante's own time. And the figure that I feel I would meet here, who got this in many of his aphorisms, was that of William Blake. His quatrain captures it as well as anyone has ever caught this attitude of Mars, which ran, "He who binds to himself the joy does the winged life destroy." Paradoxically, not giving your life to life actually destroys life, whereas he who kisses the joy as it flies lives in eternity's sunrise. Kissing the joy as it flies, letting it come to you for sure, but letting it go as well, and enjoying the embrace. And I think this is so important, not just in terms of knowing the moment of life and how to relate to it, but also knowing the truth of death, because Blake was also very clear that the nature of death changes, or at least our perceptions of the nature of death changes as our states of mind evolve too. So in his lowest state of mind, which he called ulro, death is just this meaningless, nihilistic fact of life. In the next state up that's a bit warmer to life, which he called generation, death is regarded as a tragedy that must be avoided at all costs. And so the relationship between life and death is not properly understood. In the third state of mind, which he called Beulah, death is regarded as a tragedy too, but can be embraced, seen as part of life, but a kind of sad and desperate end to life. Whereas in the state he called eternity, because death has been embraced in every moment, our final death, in terms of exiting mortal life, is seen as another moment when we live in immortal life that was known, in fact, during mortal life, when the joy was kissed as it flies. And so I think William Blake would be there in the heaven of Mars, instructing on the true nature of self-sacrifice, perhaps closely aided by the figure of Krishna from the Bhagavad Gita, which was so influential upon Blake too. And Krishna teaches Arjuna the nature of sacrifice in life to know a wider life too. Dante gets it and is in the next heaven, which is the heaven of Jupiter. And what becomes possible in this state of mind, with this perception of reality, is speaking with cosmic life. Dante sees souls here, and he can't tell whether they're saying I or we, whether they're speaking in the singular or the plural. He hears both at once, because these individuals have so enriched their individuality by opening up to the qualities of life, by inhabiting the virtues, such as humility, that they seem to flow not only in a beautiful harmony altogether, which he sees, but speak with the one voice of life itself, which he hears too. And he sees all sorts of people here that he really wouldn't have expected to see had his perception of reality not opened up in the ways that it now has and is increasingly doing so. In particular, he sees non-Christian figures here, Roman emperors, mythological figures from very distant past times in the Greek world, and he's truly shocked and surprised, because part of him as a Christian felt that only Christians could properly be in heaven. But the eagle of Jupiter whom he encounters swoops around him, delighted at his surprise, because he knows that this is Dante's moment to appreciate that all life is God's life, and so will be taken into the divine life too. And the figure who I feel I would meet here is that of Iamblichus, the late Neoplatonic figure. The reason why he captures something of this spirit to me is because he worked out a theurgistic method that could train you to become attuned to the divine life across all aspects of reality. He had practices that enable material reality to radiate with the divine life. He had practices that enabled noetic, intelligent reality, if you like, to radiate with the divine life, and also the stages in between. He thought that we should go on pilgrimages, we should visit holy places, which speak both of the transcendent and the immanent, in order to increase our faculty with seeing the divine life. And so I reckon that Iamblichus would be in the sphere of Jupiter, distinct, and yet distinct because he speaks with the fullness of divine life. Here, Dante gets it and immediately finds himself in a seemingly rather different place. And this is the heaven of Saturn. And it's different because suddenly it's silent. And Beatrice tells him that he has been protected, in fact, from hearing the higher heavenly harmonies and music, which would deafen him and risk destroying him if he heard them immediately. And I think what this is saying is that there is a music, a voice, a sound that what we normally hear and can join in with comes from, but it's almost out of our earshot, and so sounds like a silence. And what Dante has to learn here, has to become more attuned to here, is how his intelligence, the voice that he has, can become more aligned with this divine intelligence that seems to come out of the silence before it's manifest in his life and manifest in the other lives that he'd seen in the sphere of Jupiter. And the person who I feel would be here to guide me is that of the 20th century Vedantic sage Ramana Maharshi. And he has become very well known for saying the highest teaching is silence, and speaking only when he must to guide people, and in particular speaking mostly to say to people, ask yourself who you are, make this inward turn, discover these qualities, these resonances, these ways in which actually your life rests on the divine life, by asking yourself this question, who am I? But people testify to just sitting with him in silence and feeling their minds quieten as they enter what Dante might call this Saturnine experience of reality, which is a silence so rich that it seems to resonate everything. It is like a white hole out of which all glory, all goodness, all truth, all intelligence comes, that people testify to experiencing when they sat with Ramana Maharshi. That's why silence, more generally, is always such a key part of the mystical tradition. It's not a puritanical aversion to noise, it's tuning into the divine intelligence so that the noises we make might communicate that. Dante gets it and climbs a ladder with Beatrice into the next heavenly domain, which is the heaven of the fixed stars. He, in particular, finds himself in the constellation of Gemini, which is his birth sign. And I think the reason why he finds himself here is because this is the place in which the whole of creation resonates with the whole of his life, symbolically held by the constellation of Gemini. And what he comes to know here is how the grace of creation sustains his life, and he also helps sustain the grace of creation in return. He discerns in a way that there's no division between what we might call the natural world and the supernatural world, between the living and the dead, and between love and intelligence, all these binary ways that sometimes it's useful to talk about life. he also discerns that creation is redeemable and in fact radiates with divine life. It's quite easy these days to reach the Gnostic conclusion, which is that the material world isn't redeemable and that what we require is a kind of escape from it into a divine life that has otherwise left it. David Bentley Hart actually has been remarking that this Gnostic impulse may well be one that becomes more and more present as the material world, as creation, seems to become more and more disenchanted. But it's a misconception which Dante and we can get in this heaven of the fixed stars when we actually detect, even if only in glimpses, the divine life in the more immediate life of the created world. And we get it by participating in it, not by pursuing these abstract quantities of wealth, not by measuring and seeking how to control it, not by trying to possess it and secure life for us, but precisely by sharing in its life, amplifying it when possible, studying, contemplating, enjoying it too, but participating with it. So this heaven has something clear to inspire in us now. And the figure who I feel I might encounter is the mythological figure that is captured in the image of Botticelli's Primavera. Now, this famous image contains many figures, but I am quite inclined to view it as a whole, showing different aspects of the created order it's set against this beautiful woods with the flowers at the feet of the figures, and moves from, on the dark side, with the figure of the west wind that's bitter, attacking a nymph who becomes Flora, spring, the figure of Venus there, radiating love in the middle, and Cupid above. This is creation striking us, drawing us, enticing us, but also fearing, making us feel fearful as well. But continuing across, we get to the three graces, these virtues that can dance with the created world, can channel it to us, can help us to participate more with it. And then on the far side is the figure of Mercury, who can look up and see the transcendent aspects of creation too. So I almost feel that Botticelli's Primavera is like a representation of all the feelings that we might have about the created world, but sees them as a whole, and so shows us how they might be embraced as a whole as well, so that like Dante in the sphere of the fixed stars, we can radiate with the grace of the created world, saying yes to it, that which is natural and supernatural, and so know how to navigate a way and find a way through it without destroying it. Dante gets that from the heaven of the fixed stars, and so finds himself in the next domain, which is the primum mobile. Now this is a very fascinating part of reality that he detects and becomes capable of perceiving now, because it's the point where the dualities that he'd been contemplating in the heaven of the fixed stars find their proper relation, and in particular time finds its proper relation to eternity. Space finds its proper relationship to the all. And it's actually relationship itself that Dante, I think, realizes more keenly than anything else that holds all things together. That space, for example, is not like a Cartesian grid that separates points on a map, but rather space is a quality of relationship, and separation and distance is a felt relationship, not one that ultimately is measurable. And time is flexible. It can be like chronos, clock time, but it can also be like kairos, revelatory time, and it can also be like eternity, timeless, speaking of timeless things in every moment. And the figure who I feel I might meet here is another living figure. She's a psychotherapist called Judith Hemming, and she practices a type of therapy called family constellations. And family constellations is about arranging different people in your life in a way that represents how you relate to them and how they relate to you. Are you near or far emotionally in terms of desire and love that then is mapped out in a constellations workshop, of which Judith Hemming, to my mind, is probably the greatest living practitioner that I know. And she's able to see the true nature of such relationships, and so I think express something of what Dante glimpses in the Primum Mobile, this meeting point of heaven and the created world, this meeting point of eternity and time. And Judith is able to communicate the deeper resonances that show up in our life, sometimes as problems, sometimes as traumas, sometimes as things we sort of yearn to fix but don't quite know how to embrace and see through. But we can, when we find the way to say yes to the whole of life, to understand how it relates. And Dante understands that himself, and so finds himself entering the highest heaven outside of space and time, the most natural and immediate place where the divine light is transparently visible to him, the Empyrean. And he has to sing the praise and the joy and the delight of the qualities of this place. He gets asked to speak about faith, hope, and love. Interestingly, can still get things wrong, even in this highest place. He goes blind when he's trying to talk about love at one point, and what that means, though, now is not that he is condemned, not that he suddenly falls out of heaven, but that rather his mistake tips him more fully into a clearer perception of these heights. Dante has become established, you might say, in the paradisal way, which is not the same as knowing everything about the paradisal way. There's actually, I guess, potentially always an infinite more to know about it. But he rehearses in this part of the Divine Comedy what he does know about it, feels that resonating with the life around him, the light around him, the souls and angels around him, and so able to receive more and more even by his singing. And you might put it like this, that he now completely knows that it's not that he had life, as we can sometimes feel immortal life when we suspect the clock might be ticking down, but rather that life always had him and always filled him, always wanted to radiate the joy and the goodness down upon him. And so he understands that. But he understands it and knows it and shares in it because he has become what Meister Eckhart, the figure that I would hope to meet in this domain, called detachment. And that is focusing most clearly upon the uncreated part of ourselves, knowing, Meister Eckhart didn't put it like this, but you might say knowing the Empyrean life within yourself even now. And that requires understanding and seeing the things that are transient and kissing them as they fly, and resting more and more in the uncreated part of ourselves, which Meister Eckhart said is being born every moment within us, because that's what it is to be part of the divine life. And Dante sees that, he knows that, and so has the vision of paradise, which the Divine Comedy famously ends with, when he feels himself to be resonating, spinning, he says, like a perfectly balanced wheel with the love that moves the sun and the other stars, sharing in this intelligent life that has the effulgence of all life. But I hope you can see perhaps that there's a sort of steady unfolding to Dante's perceptions that the paradise quite accurately wants to carry us through. It starts in the heaven of the moon with trusting quality, the heartfelt, you might say, the energy of life, not just to ride it for its own sake. It's got to be discerned. Everything has to be understood in order to be really integrated, but prioritizing that as the path forward. This enables him to learn how to reflect more fully the divine glory, which he sees in the heaven of Mercury, and also to know the divine love within him and those whom he loves, and so love the whole of the creation as well, which he learns with this quite promiscuous love that he encounters in the heaven of Venus. It takes him to the heaven of the sun, where he realizes that although people can speak with different voices, there's always part of the light of the truth in what they say, even if it has become distorted. And so he learns to tune into that, which takes him to the heaven of Mars, because that's about letting go of what you regard as your own possession, sacrificing that in order to embrace more of life. That takes him into the heaven of Jupiter, where he's able to speak with all other reflections of the divine life, all the other souls and angels speaking as themselves, but because they're speaking as themselves, speaking as one too. And then that precipitates his step into the heaven of Saturn, where all falls silent and he detects the divine intelligence that is the source of all intelligence and can be brought into voice, into hearing, as we grasp it, tune with it, participate in it. Which leads to the heaven of the fixed stars, where he understands the grace of the created world that filled his life and that he can share, before entering the Primum mobile, the penultimate heaven, which is this meeting point of time and eternity, of space and relationship, and understanding that we're connected in ways that aren't often manifest to us, particularly when feeling troubled in life, when suffering in life, but that can be detected nonetheless. And in fact, the trouble and the suffering, when it ceases overwhelming us, comes to be seen as the path that carries us towards this deeper connection, and that leads him finally to the Empyrean, where he has this proper relationship to all that he has and is, which Meister Eckhart and other spiritual adepts have called detachment. It's knowing and loving and valuing, but only because all is seen and known to reflect the uncreated. And so he can say that his life and God's life is one life.